Hey Vigo, how you doing today?
I'm good, Trey. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for the time. I really enjoyed this movie, as plenty of other people have described it. Although it's hard to fit this film into a box, it is a bit of a Western and also a love story centered around a female character. Some have called it a feminist Western. It is inspired by your own mother, though, in terms of the genesis of you creating this story. How is it initially inspired by your own mom?
Well, she wasn't someone on the Western frontier, obviously. I'm not that old.
Yeah.
But no, in terms of the character, the personality of our 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 lead, Vivian, my mother had that kind of personality. She was, like Vivian, a woman of her time, mother, housewife, mother of three boys, but she was very independent in her thinking, and as much as was possible, owing to the limitations of the time she lived in, um, free in her movement, very strong willed person, stubborn in a way, curious about the world, and didn't put limitations on herself in terms of the opinions she had about things and her curiosity about the world and about people. And so that was sort of the model in terms of the type of woman I wanted to tell a story about. Um, and I putting her in a Western setting in that historical period, to me, just I thought it gave more, rather than say now or even in the 20th century, more obstacles, because that's a society at the time, the Western frontier, small town, um, kind of a lawless place
Hmm.
where the society was dominated by men generally, but specifically by a couple powerful, unscrupulous men who were not averse to using violence to achieve what they wanted.
That's right.
I
It's
thought that
it's the type of place where you get people's attention by firing a gun a couple of times, even if you are inside the saloon.
exactly, exactly, and I thought that would create more obstacles for her to be how she is.
Yeah, and Vivian is played so well by Vicky Creeps, who has obviously received a ton of recognition for her portrayal of Vivian. You actually sought her out to play this role. What did you see in Vicky that made you think that she would do so well in this capacity?
Well, when I finished writing the script, I had seen the first thing I remember seeing her in was The Phantom Thread. Um, and she just had an incredible screen presence, very strong presence. She seemed to transmit her thoughts and feelings almost like through her skin. It's one of those things that are kind of mysterious about movies. You can take an actor who's great on stage, who's, really great actor or actress, and then in front of the camera, they may be really right for the character and they do a great job. But then there are some people that have something extra. They have a presence, they have something that the camera seems to almost drawn to, right? And that we recognize as audience members. There's something extra, something special that they have on screen. And even in silent moments. And since this was a character that transmits a lot, even between the words, I was looking for someone that had that quality, and I could think of no one better than her. But you never know, if someone's going to be available, if they're going to even like the story or the character. Fortunately, she read it right away and said yes right away, which made us all, the whole team really hopeful. It's like, okay, now there isn't like a limit to what we can do. It's up to us now to surround her with good actors and to tell the story well, But we do have a chance now that she said yes to playing Vivian. We have a chance to make a good movie with a strong woman at the center of the story.
In an interview that you and Vicky did together, I think it was at TIFF, she said that acting is playing. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Totally. Yeah. If you're not playing and you're not having some fun, then I don't know why you're doing it. But personally, I agree with that. It's really important to be as prepared as you can be as a team and know what you're going to shoot. know how you're going to approach telling the story because you have a limited time to do it, limited budget, but then to keep an open mind to what the crew and the cast of actors, their ideas, their input, because a good idea can come from anywhere. And sometimes someone has a take on a line reading, or a way to compose a shot that's better than what you had planned to do. And it's you got one shot to tell the story as best you can, and it's much better to do it as a team. That's what I've learned from the good directors and
Yeah,
actors.
Yeah, I love to hear you talking about the importance of the collaborative process. You obviously wear a ton of hats in this film. You write it, you direct it, you act in it. You're one of the co-stars. You actually compose the music for this film too. But you
Mhm.
talk about the collaborative process being key in this story being told correctly. Is that partially the result of you also working with rigid filmmakers who weren't willing to collaborate, and therefore the project ends up suffering as a result?
Well, that's a good point. And I think that as much as I can say that I've been extremely fortunate over several decades to work for really talented women and men, directors, cinematographers, producers, screenwriters, um, good storytellers, and learned how to prepare things well and how to collaborate well. I've learned probably just as much, or in some cases more, from the few instances where I have seen people not work in the most efficient way. In other words, not listening, being, as you say, rigid, like not. And sometimes those people make good movies, like that. No, it's my way or the highway, and I don't want you to change the line, or I don't want to do a different shot. This is the way I'm doing it. This is the way I always pictured it. And I'm sticking to my guns. And sometimes they make really good movies that way. But I'm convinced, although I can't prove it, obviously, but I'm convinced that those movies would have been even better if they'd been more open to the collaborative aspect of filmmaking. And I think they would have had more fun, personally. I mean, it is play, and it's serious play, but it's still play, and it's good to have a laugh, and it's good to be honest when you don't have the answers for an actor or for a crew member. Okay, well, let's try to work it out. That's a good question. I don't know how we're going to do this, or I have a very good idea about how to do this, but if you disagree, tell me why.
Yeah, the process can involve hard work, but it can also be enjoyable too. Those two things are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Now, this story was also told in a non-linear structure, which you said is all about finding the rhythm, which is very similar to editing music, which was an interesting comment to me. How so?
Well, like when you're editing music, which is something I had experience with before directing my first movie, Falling. Um, Although I had not edited images, when I got into the editing and when we started working on that, I realized that there was something similar with music, you know, what the levels are in terms of volume and how many notes tell a certain part of that story of that song or that piece of music. If you listen enough, it'll tell you what's needs to be there and what you can lose, what you can cut away. How much can you take out of a melody and still have the melody be there and work? Same with a poem, let's say. How many words can you take out and still get the idea across? And same goes with storytelling in the movies. I think it's just as important many times what you don't show and what isn't said um, in a movie that gets something across to the audience, allows them to think for themselves. And I think some filmmakers are not don't trust the audience, or maybe it's because when the budgets are really big, they're like, oh, we got to really make everything clear, and we got to have a voiceover to explain this, and the dialogue has to explain this, and the music has to tell them that they have to be afraid or be happy or be whatever. And I'm not a fan, just as an audience member. I don't like movies where they underestimate my intelligence, basically, and spoon feed me everything. And so I made the kind of movie I wanted to see, that I like in both cases so far. A movie where hopefully there's enough happening in the first 10, 15 minutes that's interesting or attractive enough that I get involved as an audience member. And then I have the pieces to put together and then begin to participate in a way, almost as a storyteller myself, as an audience. Like the director is respecting my ability to put it together for myself and draw my own conclusions. That's why I like Q&A sessions, the question answer sessions after screenings with audiences, which I've done quite a few already for this movie in different places, different cultures. And first of all, it's really encouraging when they stay at the end of the movie, they haven't left.
Yeah.
And then they have lots of questions, like too many more than you can answer. It just means something has worked. They've connected. They've made the story their own. And sometimes their comments are surprising. Like, well, I never thought of it in that way. Or, no, I wasn't conscious of trying to say that. But if you feel that way, well, it's valid. It's your movie now, you know? So have at it.
Yeah, that's hard for young storytellers to understand the idea behind not giving every mundane piece of information and letting the audience come to their own conclusions. And typically it's the right conclusion, but with art, it is very subjective as well. So I love to hear you really expressing that and talking about that. Now, there are certain details that you made sure to get right, though, in this film. One, I love the sweeping vistas that were throughout this movie. Kudos, I guess, to Durango, Mexico for that one. But you also wanted to make sure to get the horseback riding correct, too. How did you go about doing that?
Well, I grew up with horses, so that was an advantage. I started riding when I was 3 or 4, and I've always liked being around horses. And when I've watched Westerns, even from when I was a little kid, even in some of the better Westerns, every once in a while there's an actor that I can tell, as someone who knows horses, they're not that comfortable around the animal, or it's even the way they walk up to it, or the way they get on and off, or they try to be too flashy, or it's just not, it's not believable. And I've always thought when I watch Westerns, well, horses were the mode of transport, whether it was with wagons or riding them, unless you were taking a train somewhere, that's it, And if you're not comfortable around horses as an adult in the West, it's, unless you're living in San Francisco or something, it's looks odd to me, when you see cowboys that don't ride that well, and you do see that in movies sometimes, and maybe people don't notice it that much, but we were very careful with that and tried to make sure that the horsemanship was right, and just the look of the riding, the look of the horsemen, and even Vicky, fortunately she knew how to ride before we did this movie, so she looks right at ease on a horse, which was helpful. And yeah, that was important.
Yeah, I think it's very similar to an actor getting cast in a sports movie, let's say, but it's very clear whenever they pick up a ball that they've never done so before, and that just completely shatters the believability of it all.
Yeah, it ruins it for you. You kind of want to go with it if you like the story, but you kind of, in the back of your mind, you're like, yeah, he's not a baseball pitcher, or whatever. And yeah, it's the same thing. But it was as important to get those aspects of the riding and as it was to get the saddles right, and the lamps in the saloon, and the clothes, and the language too. The way people spoke back then is a little different from now, and not every character spoke the same way. Whether it's the mayor, Schiller, he's probably the most verbose, and he has a certain, you can probably feel from the way he talks, he's probably the only person in the region that's, has a law degree or something, and Weston's father, played by Garrett Dillahunt, he's a man of few words. He's more of a man of action. He has certain impatience for people who talk a lot and who talk in a refined way. So you see that right away in that dialogue in the bank between the mayor and Garrett's character. And I like those details and turns of phrase that different people had. And then, to have the two leads, the main lead being Vivian and then Olsen, not be Anglo-Saxons, not have English as their first language. That's kind of reflective of the way society was back then, even just as much as now in a way, unless you were Native American, you came from all kinds of places, and it was important. That was another historical detail I wanted to get right, is you not just have some Chinese people or Mexican people in the background, but have people from different cultures and with different languages and accents and vocabularies thrown in there. It feels more realistic in terms of the time period.
I love that detail, but I also loved how the first time your character asks Vivian where she's from, she says America, because ultimately, even if they're not necessarily from the U.S., they are still pursuing that American dream back in the 1800s too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and she's from she's from the Northeast, right on the border with Canada, and they're a French-speaking family. You know, you see that in the flashback scenes of her childhood. And that's what they speak at home, but they're no less American than Alfred Jeffries is, you know. It's like it's a country that's made up of lots of different kinds of people. And so she throws that back at him. Yeah, I am American. He's like, well, you don't sound like it. And it's like, that's his limitation. It's like, well, Americans sound like, yeah, as they do today. They have all kinds of accents and they're from all kinds of places. People even that were born in the United States. So,
yep. So I think for a lot of us, each new experience is hopefully a learning experience, Viggo. Considering that this was a new experience for you, not your first time to necessarily do all these things, but to do so in telling this story, what did you learn from getting to make The Dead Don't Hurt?
I guess cautiously, I learned to just trust my judgment after taking in everybody else's point of view. If I feel really strongly, these are the shots I want today, and I don't need a close up, for example, or I don't want to do another angle on the scene. I feel like I've got what I need in the editing room to trust that a little bit more, you know, and that just comes from experience and doing it, I think. You know, over decades, I've learned from really good filmmakers and storytellers. So I've taken that in and I've tried to make the most of it. And each story is different, just like every actor is different. And the best thing you can do is be flexible and open-minded, because you can't treat every actor the same way as a director. You're not going to get the same result. You have to just adapt to the day, adapt to how they feel, adapt to their strengths, and try to find the best way to put them at ease and work well as a team, you know. And I don't know what the next one will be like. It'll be a different kind of story. I also learned making The Dead Don't Hurt that it just reconfirmed I like the Western genre, and hopefully I'll get to make another one.
And last question now, what do you love about filmmaking?
I like the team aspect of it. I mean, it's a very complete universe in terms of creative exploration, all kinds of skills, you know, from different kinds of people. Craftsmanship, artistry, you know, it's a very complete artistic universe. But the best thing of all is that it's a collaborative effort, and you're always going to make a better movie if you rely on your team and make them feel valued, and they're not just their technical skills important as actors or crew members, but that their personal involvement in the storytelling is valued as well. And it creates a bond right from the beginning, and it's not just another shoot. It's not just another movie, not just another job. It's a special, unique, one-off opportunity to tell a particular kind of story together.
Beautifully put. He is Viggo Mortensen, the writer, director, star, and composer of The Dead Don't Hurt. It actually opens in theaters today, May 31st, and it is one of those films that you do want to see in the theaters if you can. Viggo, real honor and a pleasure getting to speak with you today. Thank you so much for the time.
Likewise. Thank you for your time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, I would greatly appreciate you subscribing to the YouTube channel. Also, please do click that thumbs up button for today's episode. You can connect with us online at our website, booksonpod.com. We'll talk to you next time on Books on Pod.